we do when an issue is really a crisis and dialogue just isn't possible at all? Well, us in the NVC community believe in a concept that we call the protective use of force. The protective use of force is this concept that we can use force, and we choose to use force when the only intention we have within ourselves is to protect either ourselves or to protect another person. But let's be clear. The protective use of force does not entail the intent to either punish, condemn, or label someone as bad or wrong. Rather, the only intention is to protect one's own self or another. So the classic example given of this is an example where a little child runs out into traffic, and we all sort of agree that the use of force to either pull the child back or push them forward fulfills many more needs than the alternative. But that example is very non-controversial. It's not very contentious. And there are many other situations we come into in our lives where the question of whether we're using protective force or non-protective force gets a little fuzzier. So let's now let me flesh out a little bit more about what I mean by the protective use of force. So the protective use of force stands in opposition to most of our punishment-based systems. When we're using sort of a punishment basis or a punishment intention behind our action to use force, we're really condemning the other person. We're labeling the other person as wrong or bad. And our intention is to somehow balance the balance sheet, to provide some sort of counterforce that'll balance out this other person's wrong behavior. And the problem there is that we're automatically triggering that other person's fight, flight, or freeze reaction. So when a little child does something like maybe draws on the wall, and our initial reaction is to punish them, send them to their room. They know the rules. We talked about this before. They need to go and sit in timeout right now. When that's our initial reaction to the situation, the child finds it so hard to see our underlying compassion in that moment. And that's because their fight, flight, or freeze reaction has been triggered. And when that reaction gets triggered, it's really, really stressful. By definition, that reaction is triggered once we've entered a stressful situation. And children and adults alike both want to avoid that because it's A, unpleasant, it's just an unpleasant sensation that we experience, and B, it really feels like all channels of communication just get shut down. There's no room to talk about and express what's going on and what's alive for me in a situation when I'm being punished and labeled as wrong for whatever it is I'm doing, and it's clear that the other person isn't showing understanding for me. And when we're acting in a way to avoid that stressful fight, flight, or freeze reaction, then we're really acting in a way that's motivated by fear. We're motivated by a fear of the consequences, and thus we're motivated by a fear of being punished. And can you see how that can be really tragic? To live in a world where instead of acting upon my own values and desires, I'm acting based on a fear of being punished, I'm really lacking so much freedom and autonomy and respect. So, ideally, we're encouraging and building a world where everyone can act based on their own values and desires and not based upon a fear of being punished or condemned or blamed. Now, the protective use of force is something that we use when our whole intention is behind protecting oneself or protecting another person. It's sort of, we use it when all other options aren't usable. That it's our only and our last resort. Ideally, after we've used the protective use of force, the intent is then to return to dialogue. Once everyone is safe in a situation, then the hope is that we can return to dialogue, honest and empathetic dialogue with everyone involved, so we can really understand the needs that are present and really the needs that people are lacking. And then we can together come up with constructive and creative solutions that meets everyone's needs. And sometimes that moment, that dialogue, can't happen right away. Sometimes we need a moment to sort of be separate, to recollect ourselves. And that's totally fine. That's a great thing that has to happen sometimes. But still, the intent is still there, that after we've separated ourselves and had our time to collect ourselves and process and really regain a grounding sense of presence and safety in ourselves, the intent is to return to dialogue, to come back and have that empathetic and honest conversation. So let me give an example of this. So let's take kids playing on a playground. We see Philip and Billy, and Billy has a lot of energy, and a lot of aggressive energy coming up in him, and he finds himself often taking out that aggressive energy upon Philip. And this really takes the form of pushing Philip down, sort of shoving him out of the way when he wants to get on the slide, and maybe even physically hitting Philip. Now, a teacher, Mr. Brown, notices all of this going on, and he intervenes. And he intervenes because he's scared and he's concerned about the safety of Philip. And so he comes over and he takes Billy by the hand and escorts him away and leans down and explains to Billy, "Look, I'm really scared about Philip's safety. And unfortunately, the only thing I can think of to ensure Philip's safety right now is for you to follow me over here." And so Billy does. And Billy comes with Mr. Brown over to the quiet area of the playground. And now Mr. Brown has sort of been able to recollect himself in that 5-minute walk and asks Billy, "I'd love to have a conversation with you and really hear what's going on for you. Why is it that you're hitting and pushing Philip? But if you're not able to talk right now, I understand. And I'd love to take you inside to a classroom and we could get some games going and figure out something else fun and interactive to do right now with this time before class starts again." So let's notice some unique features of this example that are different than how most of us probably normally deal with schoolyard fights. So clearly Mr. Brown isn't aiming at punishing Billy. He's not trying to exact some sort of balancing act or revenge act upon Billy. If he were, then what would probably happen is that Billy would be given detention, or Billy might Mr. Brown might call Billy's parents, or maybe Billy would be sent to the principal's office, or even Billy gets suspended from school. These are all traditional punishment systems, that there's sort of a punishment given in order to rectify or mark a sort of bad action that was taken by Billy. Instead of all of those things, Mr. Brown merely just takes Billy out of the situation. He physically separates Billy from Philip. And then what happens? Well, then Mr. Brown tries to engage in a conversation with Billy about what are his needs, what's going on for Billy right now that are really leading to him choosing to interact with Philip in a really aggressive and physically threatening manner. So that's one example where this protective use of force comes into play. But let's think about and reflect upon where in our own lives and where in our own institutions could adopting this very strict and limited intention behind force transform us. What comes immediately to my mind is sort of the prison system and how we view prisoners. Now certainly there are lots of ways that the prison system currently does protect individuals and the wider society. But are there ways in which the prison system currently punishes or condemns prisoners and criminals as bad people? Where in the prison system is there room for a return to dialogue, where all the parties involved in the incident can get together and have an honest and empathetic communication about what needs aren't getting met and ways that we can together make sure that all the needs in a situation are getting met? And in what areas, once someone leaves the prison system, leaves a designated prison facility, in what ways are we still punishing them, still viewing them as evil or bad people? And in what areas are we inviting those people as they leave the prison facility to re-enter into honest and empathetic communication and connection with the rest of us? And I'll leave you with this last thought. Just think about for yourself, a real great maybe tester is, when you find yourself using force, is your intention to return to dialogue? Or is your intention for the force itself to be the final act? Thank you for watching.